This part of the fortress will be a very important piece. Building the keep of a castle represents a double challenge. On the one hand, it will have to fit aesthetically into the rest of the bastion, even if it will have to stand out as a piece of residence of the lordship. On the other hand, in a wargaming context, it will have to provide strategic advantage and tactical space for the game itself. For this keep, as well as for the other parts of the fortress, I resorted to some tricks to make the work more efficient. I first created molds on these pieces. Some represent the maculations, obtained thanks to the template you have already seen in the Warhammer Watchtower video. Others are wall segments. I designed them in such a way that they can intertwine with each other, forming longer segments but, above all, perfectly connected edges. But we will see this later. The basic structure will have to be roughly cubic in shape. I found an old double-layered thick cardboard gift box and I block it in place with adhesive tape. All crafting journeys begin with a simple gesture, laying the first brick. Using the cardboard box as support, I proceed with the single brick technique for the entire base layer. I don't worry about being super accurate, because I will use some gimmicks to level everything once the brick laying is complete. Now let's insert the wooden supports obtained from some XPS foam sticks. I use a metal brush, rather rigid, to engrave the wood grain. At this point you will see what I need these resin clone pieces for. They are perfect corners. I plan to use those molds with plaster in the future to reduce processing costs. The foam allows me to make changes even during the construction. It is very easy to cut and remove, and we must never be afraid to modify our project if we have the opportunity to add interesting details, such as these vertical support beams. Now let's complete our walls with individual XPS foam bricks. The final effect will be fantastic. Although we are very far from the end of this piece, I prefer to immediately experiment with this priming technique, to be sure that the final effect is the one desired and not to risk ruining everything once the entire construction is finished. I used Mod Podge diluted and mixed with black acrylic paint, as in the classic tradition. This time, as I did in the past, I add baking soda to the mixture. This will have a double purpose, that is, to give a certain texture to my painting and to fill in the cracks between the bricks in a natural way. During the process, I also added some dry baking soda, spreading it evenly on my wall, making sure it ended up accurately in every crack. Once dry, this type of paint will protect the XPS foam, making it rock hard. Now let's take care of the battlements. They will have to provide a solid tactical space for the miniatures and act as a base for the turret, which instead will be mainly an aesthetic detail. I used recycled foam pieces, cutting them to sides to cover the entire upper part of the keep. I used the green stuff war textured roping to create the flooring, and to improve the camouflage effect of the joints, I cut out the pieces of flooring that I will then replace with other pieces, as you can see here. The whole is completed with some filler for the walls. Now, the fun part. This is the beauty of having previously created the stocks of these pieces, maculations and laces, otherwise very boring to create in progress. It's like playing with Lego, it only remains to put them together and the work is completed in a fast, precise and extremely satisfying way. Again, I use wall filler to fill in the spaces given by the irregularity of my cardboard box. Now, a very important detail of a purely aesthetic nature. The facade of the keep will represent one of the focal points of the internal courtyard of the fortress. I therefore decided to create a refined, rounded staircase worthy of the lordship of the castle. To do this, I used scraps of foam, leftovers from my previous work on Diablo pools. Take a look at that video if you don't know what I'm talking about. Once the brick pattern was drawn, I glued the semicircles with PVA glue to optimize the cleanliness of the work. Final details. Thanks to the proxon, I cut the upper part of 2 columns. These I created thanks to the shifting lens template. Take a look at my video on the staircase of the Diablo dungeon to see how I created them. These columns will be placed next to the staircase as a support for 2 statues that I cloned with silicone molds and then recreated in resin. Now that we have finished the lower structure, we just have to dedicate ourselves to the upper turret. So far, so good. Okay guys, this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe this channel. Share this channel with your friends and till next time, happy crafting!